foreign predatory parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman, dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing onto it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a great resist. Just like the koalas being euthanized to make way for wind turbines or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. G'day, Senator Malcolm Roberts from Brisbane, giving you the weekly wrap. And we're starting on time. I've got my act together. G'day, hippie Trev from Biggendon. Hi to you, mate. And thanks for, maybe it's a lady, so thanks for tuning in. Hill Summit Homestead, g'day to one and all, and the same to you. The last thing that happened in federal parliament in the week before last actually didn't happen. I moved a motion calling for a royal commission to be called on by the Prime Minister. The Liberal Party launched a motion involving trying to wedge the Labor Party, the Greens, and Senator Payman from Western Australia, and that then became a slinging match between Labor and Liberal. Labor moved counter amendments, Liberal moved amendments to the Labor amendments, and they chewed up about an hour and a half, which meant my motion to call for a royal commission, the Senate calling on the Prime Minister to call for a royal commission, was not put. So we'll have to wait for another opportunity. But we've got some really good material. And I've just seen a video from David Martin in the United States. He does some really good work. There's some questions asked about him, but this video, our expert on COVID in our office has checked it out and says it's spot on, it's fully referenced, go for it. So we're going to post that. It's about a 21-minute video from memory. I don't get much chance to watch videos or read books, and so I want to thank Robin from South Australia, Adelaide, who sent the video to me this morning, and when I was driving into work, I listened to it. Didn't watch it. I listened to it, and it is first class. It's surprising. This COVID, we thought initially that it was going on for a few months, the preparations for it rather. Then it became clear that it was started at least in 2007, and I've detailed that in the past. What David Martin says that it started in about 1965, and you watch the video, it's stunning. And our office has confirmed that it's accurate and it's backed up with references. So we're not going to let this go. We will persist until we hound down the guilty bastards that are responsible for the atrocities committed during the COVID mismanagement and deceit. Speaking of deceit, reminds me of another motion that I did actually get to move and got support from the crossbenchers, thank you very much, and from the Liberal National Party, thank you very much. The Greens did not support it, and the Labor Party did not support it. And that's a motion into the awarding or the process for awarding medals and awards within the Australian Defence Forces. Because it seems to me, well, before I go further on that, I want to thank the many veterans and also the enlisted men and women today who are contributing to our knowledge of the Australian Defence Forces. Thank you for, first of all, your service. It's really appreciated. People around the country recognise how much you serve us. And I want to say that, yet again, I had a conversation, not a podcast, but just a conversation by Zoom with a lawyer who works in the Defence Forces area, looks after veterans. And I might get to that later on, if I can find it. But I was really impressed. People in the military are very, very impressive. They've got discipline, they've got courage, they've got integrity, they stand up, and it really, I've met some outstanding people in the Australian military since I've been in the Senate and before. But anyway, coming back to I want to thank the serving members and the veterans, and I want to thank people who have been involved from both the currently enlisted, and the veterans who have helped us to understand what's needed in the military. You're very, very concerned, and rather than just say, "Oh, bugger it," and walk away, you're wanting to change the Australian Defence Forces and restore its calibre. The pride and the respect that you have for the service is really phenomenal, and it's very much appreciated, and that's why I'm trying to back you in the Senate and in Senate estimates, because you're doing marvellous work and you need to be supported, and you want the military to come back stronger than ever. Right now we've got a falling number of enlistments. We've got fewer people joining than are leaving, and the recruitment's in a mess. Apparently the culture's not at the very top, is very, very poor. A lot of people, poor morale. It's a crisis, and the Defence Forces are so very important in not only in war and in defending our country and our security, but even in peace. It's very, very important to us. So thank you so much. And I wonder why the Greens and the Labor Party did not support this inquiry. But anyway, it's up, and the inquiry will start soon. The submissions are already rolling in, so that's great. Go to the website. We'll put it up later, where you can go with submissions into the Australian Defence Force medals processes for assessing awards. But I've made some notes here. It's really about backing our troops and getting them the recognition that they deserve. Because what we've heard from many, many people is that the awarding of medals seems to be like a part of the salary expectations of the senior brass. And they nominate each other and they get medals, sometimes not in accordance with the rules, the guidelines for the letters patent for the criteria, if you like, for the awards. But they just seem to expect them. And yet they're stomping on valid applications from the enlisted ranks and who are not getting their medals and being suppressed. But the one that comes to mind is the awarding of the Distinguished Service Cross. It's Australia's third highest military decoration. It's behind only the Victoria Cross and the Star of Gallantry. So the former Defence Force Commander, Chief of the Defence Forces, General Angus Campbell, was recommended for the Distinguished Service Cross on the 29th of September 2011. That's 13 years ago. And this is what he was awarded the medal for, quote, distinguished command and leadership in action as Commander of Forces in Afghanistan. I emphasize the words in action because that is a criteria for getting the Distinguished Service Cross. You must be in action. As some of the soldiers have put it, it's a two-way rifle range. In other words, people are shooting at you, and that was never the case. He was based in Dubai, air-conditioned offices, no doubt, and he did spend 1/3 of his time in Afghanistan, but never in action. The recommendation for him to get the Distinguished Service Cross was made by the incoming Chief of Defence Force, David Johnson. He's now the Chief of Defence Forces. At the time of the nomination, for General Campbell to get the Distinguished Service Cross, the letters patent, the criteria, required the recipient to be in action to receive it. Compared with, it was changed a few months later to be in warlike operations, which is not the same as having bullets fired at you. The definition of inaction is given by a case known as Gilbert. This decision considered the term in great detail. However, to simplify the findings, it meant the recipient essentially had to be under direct fire of an adversary. As veterans, as I've said, veterans and serving defence personnel have told me, it means a two-way rifle range. Now, there are no records of General Angus Campbell being in action in a situation as defined by the Gilbert case. Now, Freedom of Information request was lodged for dates and places where General Campbell was physically present during a specific action involving direct conflict between opposing forces. That was the terms of the Freedom of Information request. No documents were found, and a defence decision maker stated they were satisfied the documents do not exist. Angus Campbell was asked directly at a Senate estimates hearing what specific action he was involved in. No action was provided. The controversy surrounding General Campbell's Distinguished Service Cross, was greatly inflamed, and this is really going to annoy people if you don't already know it, by the fact that he issued an edict in which he tried to strip other soldiers of their awards in the wake of the Brereton report. Now, the Brereton report condemned thousands of people by implication associated with war crimes. Only one person has been prosecuted. No one has been convicted. So the decision was to strip an estimated 3,000 people who served in the Special Operations Task Force of their Meritorious Unit Citation Award. Peter Dutton, as the Defence Minister, to his credit, overturned that instruction by General Campbell. But General Campbell continued his campaign to strip other soldiers of medals. Campbell's further recommendation to revoke awards for an unknown number of soldiers are still sitting on Defence Minister Richard Marles' desk more than a year later. Marles has done nothing. The fact that Campbell received his Distinguished Service Cross for command of troops, very important word, he continued to try and strip medals from, further inflamed the controversy, because it's I think a verdict from war crime trials after the Second World War involving the Yamashita Principle, or some Japanese general name. They found him guilty of war crimes committed by the people who reported to him underneath his chain of command, not direct reports to him. So General Campbell, if these people are guilty as named in the Brereton report, then General Campbell must wear some responsibility. So here he is getting a Distinguished Service Cross while failing to meet the criteria, and yet trying to strip other soldiers of their citations. So these are issues that are part of the wider issue of abuse of the award system by senior officers, and they'll be explored in the Senate inquiry that we got up. So once again, thank you to the many soldiers who have started to submit submissions now. I just want to read also from media release that our office sent out. I want to stress to everyone that witnesses are protected in giving their evidence, even though some defence personnel fear reprisals. And we know that's true. I was talking to a wonderful lawyer who works on behalf of defence forces and veterans, and he said there are examples of coercing people, trying to pressure people, trying to intimidate people, including in the Royal Commission recently. So anyone, make it very clear, anyone found to be coercing, interfering with, or punishing a person for giving evidence to the Senate committee on which I'll be a member could be held in contempt of the Senate, which is pretty serious. Submissions can be made to the committee confidentially for those people who don't want to be identified. So you can either put your submissions in confidentially or put them in publicly, and you'll be protected by the Senate. So that's coming up soon. I'm not a member of the committee that's investigating, a formal member of it, a permanent member of it, but I will be a participating member, and I'll get to ask questions. So send in your submissions and we'll try and fix this mess up. It's just part of many, many topics that we have raised in the Senate and in Senate estimates for restoring accountability to the senior levels of the Defence Forces. Also, I might want to mention that the live sheep ban went through the Senate a week before last, and that's devastating because the ban doesn't come into force immediately, but the impacts will. The ban comes into force in May 2028, so that's 4 years away. But it's already affecting prices, it's already affecting the industry, and it will cascade right throughout the economy, right throughout the whole of the live export industry. In fact, all cattle and sheep, because they're all interacting the markets for them. Well, the media has really been shown up, hasn't it? Tucker Carlson told us in person and also in large audiences around the country a couple of weeks ago that he would travel. He does travel frequently overseas, and he said that when he meets people in other countries, they say to him, "What's going on with Biden?" And he says, "Yeah, he's failing. His mental activity is failing." and the people say, oh yeah, good, I thought it was just me, my perceptions of it, but it is real. But you never hear about it in the media until recently. Now they want him out. So, he called Vladimir Putin, he mentioned Zelensky. He called Zelensky Putin, and he called Kamala Harris Vice President Trump in his media conferences today. So that used to happen a lot, but never a mention in the USA media, the globalist media, just covering it up, suppressing it. Now it's open. So it really is quite remarkable that the leader of the so-called free world was hidden in plain sight. Everyone knew what was going on. Speaking of knowing what's going on, I've been pursuing the Central Queensland and Hunter Valley miners' underpayment. It's the biggest wage theft case in Australia's history. Some miners and I did a back of the envelope calculations, and it could be over $1 billion in back pay entitled to casual miners in Hunter Valley and Central Queensland. We've now got Robert Gottliebson doing an article in the Australian, a fabulous article. I'm going to quote from it because he writes it so succinctly. But the CFMEU, they're now their offshoot. They've parted ways again. They were separate, then they came together, then they parted ways. The Mining and Energy Union in the Hunter Valley and Central Queensland have basically admitted that miners under their watch were underpaid $30,000 to $40,000 per person per year. Each person underpaid $30,000 to $40,000. I've been saying that for 5 bloody years. The Labor Party has tried to suppress me. The Liberal Party has tried to keep me quiet. The CFMEU said, no, it never happened. And now we're finding out that the CFMEU, the Mining and Energy Union, that the offshoot from the CFMEU, gone separate ways, are now putting in a wage claim for $40,000. But they're not going after back pay. They're missing the core issue. By not chasing the back pay, miners are not going to get their entitlements in Australia's biggest wage theft case. So I'm going to read you quotes from Robert Gottliebson in a minute, because this is now starting to get out into the media, where it's coming out into the open, despite the CFMEU, or the Mining and Energy Union, suppressing it for 5 years and keeping it from their members for around about 14 years. It first started, this issue was enabled by Bill Shorten changing the coal long service leave legislation to enable casuals to exactly name, if I stole $30,000, he said, from someone, I'd go to prison. Yes, you would. But Parliament is protecting these criminals. Parliament is protecting the thieves who stole this money from honest miners in the Hunter Valley and in Central Queensland. Working families in both regions of coal mining. The CFMEU basically has applied for future wages, new enterprise agreement for the Callide mine and one other mine in Hunter Valley, and they've basically admitted that the miners are being underpaid, but they're not going for back pay. They're missing the core issue because they don't want to expose themselves. Because every one of the enterprise agreements that underpays, whether it be by $20,000 or as much as $41,000 per person per year, has been signed by the CFMEU, now the Mining and Energy Union, and approved by the Fair Work Commission, the regulatory body. This is time for a drastic reform of the whole of industrial relations legislation in this country. And I've been saying that for years. It's failed. It's ripping off workers. The workers' protection, the Fair Work Commission, the Fair Work Ombudsman, the CFMEU, their employers in terms of casual labour hire companies, many of them multinationals from overseas, including the world's largest from Japan and Recruit Holdings, they're offshoot in Australia, ripping off miners. Their basic protections are worthless. And so we need a complete overhaul of the industrial relations system. In May, I added a second reading amendment to a minor bill for Fair Work Act, and it was a minor amendment requiring the Minister for Workplace Relations, Mr. Tony Burke, to investigate the issue that I've been raising for 5 bloody years. So we asked his representative and Senate estimates what was going on. Bugger all. So we will continue to chase him. And here's what's really good. The Independent Workers' Union of Australia is a newly formed union. It's applying to the Fair Work Ombudsman on behalf of members seeking back pay and making a formal complaint to the Fair Work Ombudsman. So that is really good news. The Mining and Energy Union has now got competition. One of the problems with the Australian industrial relations situation is that the traditional unions, the conventional unions, have got it stitched up. They can have no competition. They're a monopoly. When you have a monopoly, you don't have to compete on service. We've now got competition in Queensland. Yes, get smart. During COVID, unions were useless. They ran away from standing up for the safety and health of their members. Ran away until the CFMEU members in Victoria overthrew and just revolted and started attacking their senior executives in the CFMEU offices in Melbourne. But what we've got is a monopoly. And so now, listen to this. In Queensland, we've had the new Teachers Union, the new Nurses Union, Nurses Professional Association of Queensland, Teachers Professional Association of Queensland. They're nicknamed the Red Union. They're growing at a phenomenal pace because their fees are less than half of the Queensland Teachers Union and the Queensland Nurses Union. Less than half. They get a better service. And here's why. Because the conventional unions are tied in the labour machine. Now, the labour machine is not the Labor Party and the unions forming together. They are one thing. One thing. Grace was a minister in the government, Bligh government, before Campbell Newman tossed them out. When she got tossed out, she moved reportedly straight into the Queensland Teachers Union and took a $180,000 salary per year, continued working for the ALP. They're not two entities working together, the union machine in Queensland and the Labor Party. They're the same entity. They're one machine. When Palaszczuk beat Campbell Newman in the election in 2018, was it 2017? Grace went straight back into the ministry again, in and out, seamlessly. So that's what's happening. And why do they do that? Because the Labor Party gets massive donations. Members' fees come out of members' salaries, go straight into the union, straight into Labor Party campaign funding. So that's what it's all about. It's the Labor Party machine in Queensland. It's the Labor Party machine in every state. It's the Labor Party machine federally. The CFMEU gives enormous funding to the federal Labor campaign. So that's what it's all about. It's the same with super. But anyway, we've now got competition in the mining sector. The Independent Workers Union of Australia is now making applications on behalf of its members to get their back pay and take on that complaint. Yes, Matt Scott, it's revolving doors. Teachers deserve far better. Nurses deserve far better. All workers deserve far better. There are some very good traditional unions, so I want to make that clear. But without competition, they're quite prone to falling into lack of accountability and just not protecting workers' rights. So we will continue to address this issue of miners' pay, casual miners' pay, until we get justice for the miners. When I met with those 8 miners in the Hunter Valley, and then I've met with other miners and talked with other miners in central Queensland, back in 2019, around about September, October, November, there were 8 miners at Williamtown. We met at Williamtown near the airport. At the end of the meeting, I said, now let's form 3 aims, because the number 3 tends to be memorable for people. So the first one was to get the people who drew this to my attention, to get them their fair and moral and legal entitlements fully paid up. We're working on that. The second one was to stop these practices throughout the industry. We're working on that. And the third one was to bring justice to the perpetrators of this scam. And the perpetrators were the CFMEU, now the Mining and Energy Union, covering it up, the Fair Work Commission, and the large labour hire companies, particularly those foreign multinationals disregarding Australian workers. The Parliament has failed in protecting them. Parliament has completely failed. The agencies have completely failed. So we will continue until we meet those three aims. We finally got an Afghanistan on. Moving on to another topic. Oh no, I'm going to read you bits from Robert Gottliebson's article. The likely size he's calculated of Australia's largest wage theft has exploded from $100 million, his initial estimate, to $500 million as a result of a dramatic Fair Work Commission order. I'll get on. Remind me about the vaping bill. There are many questions coming in. The latest Fair Work rulings, which came down just recently, making the liability simpler to calculate, have sent shockwaves through the union movement because of the deep involvement of the CFMEU in the wage deals which led to the massive underpayment. Let's skip a couple of paragraphs. And because the CFMEU is a key funder of the ALP, there are political funding issues too. And I wonder why, if that's why the Labor Party has gone silent on this, gone dead. I'll continue. Like the other coal miners in New South Wales and Queensland, casual miners at the Callide coal mine at Billawheeler in central Queensland. I was at the front of that mine because it's part of the energy crisis at the moment. The energy debate have not been receiving their 25% casual entitlement. I'll read that again. Like other coal miners in New South Wales and Queensland, casual miners at the Callide coal mine at Billawheeler in central Queensland have not been receiving their 25% casual entitlement. That's what it's all about. And about safety and about standards and protections. Fair Work, I'll continue with what Robert Gottliebson said. Fair Work, which previously approved the union-backed wage deals, which excluded the miners' 25% casual entitlement, has now ruled that in future the casual workers must receive the entitlement. The total miner 2024-25 take-home pay therefore rises a staggering $50,000, more than 40%. And I said from the start, casual miners being underpaid 40%. I'm right. I'll go on with Robert Gottliebson. It's a remarkable story and illustrates what can happen when unions and employers get too close together and the regulator does not intervene. Exactly the people we identified from the start. The employer in labour hire companies, the union, and the Fair Work Commission. The employers put together a deal, that the CFMEU agree to that deal, sign off on the enterprise agreement, then it's ratified after a submission to the Fair Work Commission. It requires all three, otherwise it can't happen. So all three of the basic protections for miners shot, non-existent. So we need to reform the law. And Robert goes on to say, it's a remarkable story and illustrates what can happen when union and employers get too close and the regulator does not intervene. The non-ACTU aligned Brisbane-based Independent Workers Union, I just mentioned them, a division of the so-called Red Union with over 20,000 members, mainly in the nursing and teaching sectors, has taken up the miners' wage theft case and is now undertaking detailed research going back decades to document the miners' back pay claim. And I know secondhand, but directly from the person submitting these claims, that they are being submitted to the Fair Work Ombudsman. So, by the way, the Palaszczuk government, Miles government, passed laws banning the Red Union in the state. So they're working around those things because they're technically an association. So good luck to them. They've got some very, very clever lawyers involved there because they knew the Queensland Labor government would protect its donations and come after them. Okay, I'll continue with Robert Gottliebson. Wage deals about the casual entitlement were approved and sometimes negotiated by the CFMEU. They were all approved by Fair Work Commission. The mining section of the CFMEU has split off and is now called the Mining and Energy Union, and it brought the claim to have miners' casual rate entitlement paid in 2024-2025, but did not request back pay. Why not? Because you were complicit, that's why. I'll go on then. The Callide mine was purchased, but the Callide mine is only a small part of the large number of Queensland and New South Wales coal mines where enterprise bargaining deals with no casual pay entitlement were signed over the past 2 decades. Exactly as I've been saying for the last 5 years. The underpayment might never have been uncovered, but for the work of one miner, actually 2 miners, and the Federal Parliament, Malcolm Roberts, and the Independent Workers Union. The Black Coal, listen to this, the Black Coal Award makes it illegal for coal mining companies to hire casuals. Their workers must be employees. But most coal companies contracted out their mining to 5 labour hire companies who undertook the work using casuals, but did not pay those casuals the 25% casual entitlement. This is not just important for miners, it's important for all workers in all industries right across Australia, because it shows that under a monopoly labour union system, there's too much abuse by the union bosses, sorry. The radical agreements, I go on. Scotty Phillips says, lack of competition is the name of the game. Just look at the political options. The media push in Australia, it's either Labor or both sides of the same coin, not working for the people. Exactly. And we've pointed out that the policies of Labor and Liberal, Scotty, are almost identical. And so that's really a uniparty pushing globalist policies. You know, they're two cheeks of the same arsehole. And the arsehole is the UN and the World Economic Forum, whose policies are being pushed by both parties as a uniparty. And that's why they've been so strong on jailing Pauline, vilifying her, suppressing her, keeping her out of the media, calling her a racist, which is a shocking thing to call anyone in Australia. She's not a racist. But they called her all this to taint her, to smear her, because she's the only competition to the uniparty, Liberal Labor uniparty. Let's see. Instead, the Fair Work Commission approved the CFMEU in the past, endorsed claim with no 25% margin deals on the basis of a highly dubious legal technicality, which has been ruled out for 24-25. It was negotiated from 2014 onwards, these enterprise agreements. And as I said, it was a change in the coal long service leave provisions, which enabled the employment of casuals, but not in accordance with the award. Contrary to the award, they've still breached the award for the coal mining industry. The coal labour agreements are subject to what is called the Better Off Overall Test, or BOOT. Everyone knows about that. The Better Off Overall Test. But because the Black Coal Award makes it illegal for coal miners to hire casuals, the BOOT was matched against an award which does not include casuals. And that's what we've been saying. And the Fair Work Commission and the Fair Work Ombudsman have tied themselves in knots trying to deny it in Senate estimates. I've been saying it in Senate speeches. The Fair Work Commission therefore decided the Better Off test does not apply because there is no casual rate to compare it with. So there's no rate, so just rip off the workers. Just remarkable. Now it has restored the casual entitlement for 24-25. The next step is the back pay. And that's where the Independent Workers Union of Australia come in. They're the only ones pushing the back pay issue. The Australian Parliament is aware of the scandal, Robert Gottliebson continues, and last May the Senate passed a motion which requires the government to investigate claims that casual miners working under enterprise agreements in the black coal mining industry are and have been underpaid. That's my amendment that we tacked onto a Labor Party bill. If underpayments are found to have occurred, this is part of my amendment as well, if underpayments are found to have occurred, the government is required to facilitate the reimbursement of the underpayments. Robert goes on to say, I would add that surely taxpayers won't be required to pay the $600 million, which could be $1 billion. The most obvious people liable are the Mining and Energy Union and or the CFMEU and the 5 labour hire companies involved. But it's possible the Fair Work itself may be held liable for the part of the wage theft. Excellent article from Robert Gottliebson. Excellent article. If you can get it in the Australian. I've forgotten the date. Okay, let's move on. The Ute tax, the Afghanistan document. We finally got documents from the investigation into the Brereton report, the Oversight Commission, which the government tried to deny us. We finally got that. And it vindicates what we've been saying. These Liberal Labor parties, when they're in government, they try to hide. And, the top brass has been throwing soldiers on the ground under the bus when it came to the Brereton report, without a doubt. We saw the Ute tax passed. This is actually a couple of months old now. It'll make more petrol. It'll make all petrol and diesel cars much more expensive to you to buy. And the government has been forced into embarrassing change to make to its energy policies. Federal gas intervened a year or so ago, which we said was the nationalising of the gas industry, and it was. They've now relaxed some of that because they realise it's reduced oil and gas exploration. And then we see New South Wales Eraring Power Station being now the Labor Party saying, let's keep it open and let's subsidise them to do that. So here's the go. Eraring is Australia's biggest power station, biggest coal-fired power station, biggest power station. And I knew something funny was going on when the Labor Party, New South Wales Labor Party government came into office on the very first night after the election win, the very first night, the incoming energy minister said, we're going to have to keep Eraring open. Just a little seed there planted, as they do. And then, of course, Eraring was going to shut in 2025 or 27, whatever it is. Now the Labor Party is so concerned at the decimation of the energy sector because they realise they can't rely on solar and wind. And so they're going to have to keep Eraring open. So here's the go. They were subsidising solar and wind to shut Eraring. They're now going to be subsidising Eraring to continue because the regulations make it very hard for a coal-fired power station to continue. So think of all, one day I'll give you a presentation on this, but the firming needed for solar and wind. Yes, Nathan, we need new coal-fired power stations, fuel refineries, manufacturing parks in each state. We've got plans for manufacturing parks in just in north of Moorumba there, Abbott Point, and also in Port Hedland in Western Australia. Or part of the project Iron Boomerang. But we need firming because a grid on coal and natural gas and nuclear and hydro is stable. It's synchronous. Solar and wind are asynchronous, unstable, very, very costly to fix. So you've got to put firming things in place firming management to manage the solar and wind grids. You've got to have storage because the sun sometimes stops shining and the wind stops blowing. You've got to have transmission costs, which are enormous because what happens, reset some of the, I'm trying to read quotes coming in. The coal-fired power stations, hydro, nuclear, gas, oil power stations are very concentrated, limited land use, and they can be put fairly close to the metropolitan areas where the electricity is needed. But solar and wind are scattered all over the joint, way out into the regions. So the transmission lines are longer, far, far longer because they're further, because the source of the power is further away. Plus they're scattered, which means you've got to connect all the different scattered sites up because each solar and wind industrial complex, produces very little power on its own. So, and AEMO, the Australian Energy Market Operator, now admits that unless something happens, we could be in serious trouble as early as this summer. Crisafulli, Queensland, Liberal Nationals, supports 75% solar and wind. Man's insane. They haven't done any thinking. I'm going to be exposing a lot of this pretty soon. The Uni Party, just insane. Labor's dreams, nightmare, are uncosted. Labor itself has said as part of the election promise, $80 billion. $80 billion. That we now know that's about half, could be as little as half as what the estimates from experts are now saying. $1.3 billion, $1.5 billion, $1.6 billion. These are some of the estimates. Katie McCallum, I want to give a shout out to our Gympie candidate for the state seat of Gympie. Amazing woman, has been really pushing to expose the solar and wind rorts. And now we've got Peter Dutton piggybacking on our policies, sort of. We've got housing and immigration onto the agenda. Labor Party and Liberal Party are now saying, yes, we'll cut back on immigration. Well, that's bullshit. They've been saying that for a while, but they won't actually do it, not meaningfully. We need to send some people on resident visas home because there are people in Australia sleeping under bridges and in cars and in parks, and they desperately need housing. Energy policies, Peter Dutton is last saying, let's remove the nuclear ban. That's what we've been calling on for many, many years in One Nation. What I don't like about Peter Dutton's nuclear policy is that he wants to replace perfectly good coal-fired power stations with nuclear. It's going to take at least 7 or 8 years because we don't have nuclear industry and backup and infrastructure in this country. It's going to be enormous. So we'll be in a mess thanks to Labor Party and Liberal Party solar and wind policies. Well before then, we need to build coal-fired power stations now, immediately. And why do we know these policies and why are they catching up? Because we listen and we found out about the homelessness issue in this country just by listening to people in Gladstone, Maryborough, Townsville, Cairns. I mean, you can't walk past people sleeping in cars in the park, good working families. You can't walk past them without saying, "What's up?" So, and another thing that Peter Dutton did with his nuclear policy, he reaffirmed that we need nuclear, in his opinion, because we need to stick with net zero, which means he's throwing coal mining under the bus. So let me go through. I need to mention guillotines were used again to cut debate by the Labor Party. Many bills were pushed through in May and June. 12 to 14 bills and amendments in one hit in May, 4 bills in another hit. And we lose our adjournment speech time because that's a time when we can speak about urgent issues, and we lose that adjournment on Tuesday because that's when they sometimes steal the time to put on the guillotines. Oh, I must remember, I haven't mentioned this to you. We had a fantastic night in Adelaide Forum. Pauline, myself, and Sarah Game, the One Nation MP in the state electorate in South Australia. It was sold out. The energy in the room was absolutely amazing. Very strong support, very gratifying. The other things, we had fantastic forums in Cairns introducing our 5 North Queensland candidates, and a fantastic session in Townsville with Anzac Day, and that evening another forum. It's just disgusting. We've got a serious crime issue in this state, and Premier Stephen Miles jets into Townsville and Cairns and says, "We're going to give you another helicopter, another police helicopter. So we're going to catch the criminals, catch the young kids quickly, and release them quickly." We need to fix the crime issue, not just spend money to look good. We need to do good, not look good. And that requires going back to the basics and understanding the issue. Bribie Island regional bank closures. Thank you for such a warm reception with so many Bribie Islanders turning up to the inquiry to talk about the need for keeping regional banks open. And Sunshine Coast, we were there a few weeks ago, 3 visits to Sunshine Coast because people have got deep concerns about the Olympics, salt water into farms because of climate and energy bullshit policies. Okay. And there was someone called Al O'Wire who was near the end of the live stream, made a comment. He asked me a question: "What are your thoughts on the sky being sprayed?" Well, I'm going to give you a summary of that claim. My response to that claim in the future, because I am one for evidence. I must have the data to back it up. Okay, let's get on to your questions. We've got about 18 minutes left. I've wanted to do Down Under Mexico BP. Okay, Malcolm, why did you vote for the most recent vaping ban bill? Well, it's very simple. We don't like the bill, but it has some minor improvements in terms of regulating vapes to protect people. The problem is not vapes. The problem is unregulated vapes, and they can be seriously damaging. The problem with vapes in America, for example, when that boy died, was unregulated cheap material coming in from China, we think. We know it was cheap material. We think it was from China. The vaping bill, we initially went and we thought we'll oppose this bill. Well, I've got 2 staff who are just really strong on this issue. They've been championing it for a while. We want vapes to be approved for use in Australia and readily accessible in Australia. That's what we want, and we have been pushing for that. The bill, when it first came up, suppressed vaping. We didn't like that. Then a few of the amendments dribbled in, and we thought, hang on, this could be beneficial here. It could regulate it, but also still allow some vaping. And then we had more amendments come flooding in. And this is the way Labor operates. They're hopeless. They don't do their research. They don't get the data. They make a mess. Look, the vaping bill suppresses vaping in some ways because what it wants to do is keep the quit smoking industry going. The best way to stop quit smoking, is vaping. Wherever vaping is regulated, licensed, and freely available, smoking rates are decreasing everywhere. And the federal government wants to keep their $500 million industry, government grants to the quit smoking industry, alive. They're people that probably vote Labor. And so what they're trying to do, and then they realized the error of their ways, and they made some amendments to the bill which enabled it to be somewhat good. We don't like it overall, but we voted for it because of the improvements in regulating of vapes. We've got a long way to go to fix the vape problem. That's why I voted for it. We were opposed to it, we were for it, we were opposed to it, we were for it after the final amendments came through. Yeah, Paul Revere, you say cold turkey is the way for some people, mate. I've never had a smoke between my lips, but I know it's difficult for some people. Hi, Malcolm. What did you think about the debate between Trump and Biden? I'm interested in your thoughts. That's from PJS. I actually didn't watch it. I watched a little bit of it. It was on in the office here. I was just too busy to watch it. I can see what Biden is. Biden's just a puppet for Obama. Calls a lot of the shots. They say, look, the Democrats are owned by the Soros party. The Democrat Party is owned by Soros in the United States, controlled by Soros. Has been for many, many years. They push the globalist agenda. I've never thought much of Biden at all. Detest the man's policies and his actions. So from what I understand, the couple of questions I saw, Trump really cleaned him up. I've never seen Trump so silent for so long, because they had their microphones turned off when they weren't speaking. Senator Get Smart says, very good question. Will there ever be any redress for people who lost their jobs because they wouldn't take an experimental jab? You're right on all your facts. We're aiming for that. I said sometime very early on, we will hound these people down, the responsible people, until they're dealt with, until they're held accountable, until they're punished. It's very, very difficult. I think there will be. I honestly do think there will be, because the cracks are emerging. The dams are breaking all over the world, especially now in the United States. The United States has got a few, actually smaller in number than ours, in Australia, a few senators and a few members of Congress who are taking it up really well. What they've got, though, is they've got two parties. The Democrat Party is a bit like a Labor Party. They don't think, they just block and they just vote in blocks. The Republicans actually have some independent thinkers, way more than the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party's only got 2 or 3, a handful. But the Republicans have got many more, and they're awake and they're pushing. Plus, they've got the state governors. And Texas and 4 other states are now suing Pfizer for lying, for fraud. And so that is expected to really turn the tide on this whole thing. So yes, to answer your question, Get Smart, I think that people will be paid, because they're all lost their funding, lost, in some cases lost lives because of a lie, an experimental jab. PJS, another good question. How safe is nuclear? What happens if a sub gets sunk? That's right. We can have nuclear at sea, in these nuclear subs, according to the Labor Party, but we can't have nuclear on land. Then we can have nuclear on land in Lucas Heights, which is fairly close to a residential area. I've never visited. I'm told it's fairly close, but we can't have them in regional areas away from built-up areas. I mean, it's just so stupid. Do you think the first past the post system is undemocratic? Yes, I do, because what we've seen in Britain is sometimes with just 33% of the vote, you can get a massive number of seats, which is what happened to the Labor Party. Around a third of the votes, yet they got a huge majority of seats. That's what happens with the first past the post. So it's not democratic. So long as you've got a majority in many seats, you can have very small numbers actually carrying that majority. What I think is important is preferential voting, because preferential voting means that if you don't get your first party elected, your vote carries through to your second preference. And if your second preference doesn't get elected, then it carries through to the third. So ultimately, this is what happens, is that you're voting for the people you least prefer to get in there to not get in. So you've got 2 bites of the cherry with preferential voting. You've got, the first one is your preferred party, and the second one is which of the 2 major parties you don't like the most. So that's very important to understand. What I don't like is compulsory preferential voting. Compulsory preferential voting forces you to put a number next to every single candidate. And so that's in the House of Reps. In the Senate, we have actually got optional preferential voting, which is perfect. You just put a number next to whoever above the line, the top 6, below the line, the top 12. That's it. So you don't have to. You can make sure your vote doesn't go to the Liberal Nationals or the Labor Party at all. Nowhere in the Senate, but in the House of Reps, that's the way. That's not the way. It is compulsory preferential voting. So your vote ultimately will go to one of the two major parties if a minor party doesn't get up. But increasingly, the minor parties are getting up, and they're getting up because of preferences. So that's why preferential voting is so important, and it reflects your democratic preferences, your vote. Yes, I hope that answers your question. Can you explain why is government giving away our gas? Well, we better ask John Howard and Bob Hawke. Again, Uniparty, Liberal, Labor. John Howard approves contracts apparently just dismissing our gas, giving it away for nothing, giving it away for peanuts. Bob Hawke ratified that. And Bob Hawke, Petroleum Resources Tax, made sure that the world's largest tax evader, Chevron, wouldn't pay a cent in tax. That's what Bob Hawke did. They're both pushing the Uniparty. And the Uniparty is in all the major democracies in the English-speaking world. America, red and blue. The red being the Republicans and the blue being the Democrats. Canada, red and blue. Now, I think it's the Liberal Party and the Conservatives. The Liberal Party is red and the Conservatives are blue. They're all red and blue. New Zealand, I think it's the Labor Party is red and the Nationals are blue. In Britain, it's the Tories who are blue and the Labor Party who are red. You can see two major parties in each of these things. And people think they're actually making a choice. That's what's fooled everyone. The globalists have got it stitched up so that people think they've got a democracy, a choice, when they don't have a democracy. They don't have a choice. Until One Nation came along, and One Nation is actually now rising in the polls. We've got considerable support behind us. It's wonderful walking down the street and people coming up saying, keep going, mate. In Australia, we've got Liberal blue and Labor Party red. And so we've got the Uniparty entrenched in all the major English-speaking democracies around the world. And, well, actually, India's in English-speaking. It's not entrenched there. But the major Anglo-based countries, Western countries, it's the Uniparty. So we've got to toss out the Uniparty. And One Nation is rising in vote. We've now got a member of parliament in each of the mainland state parliaments and the federal parliament. So it will end. Senator, why is our government so corrupt? Why is Pauline Hanson treated so badly? Well, Pauline Hanson, I'll do the first question first if you leave that up there. Pauline Hanson is treated so badly because she is the only threat to the Uniparty. The globalists' only threat is Pauline Hanson. We have been, since my first speech in the Senate, where I called for an exit from the United Nations. The United Nations was formed to be a vehicle for the globalists. That's what it was. The World Economic Forum came along in 1975, I think. They formed an alliance with the United Nations in 2018, a formal alliance. So the World Economic Forum, we've been belting them, Pauline and I, particularly me, and we've been belting them and exposing them, all their corruption, their policies that are destroying countries. They both want an unelected socialist global government, the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. We've been hammering them. So much so that the World Economic Forum, in a major page on its website about 18 months ago, called itself a strategic note or whatever. And they called out countries around the world saying people are rising in far-right extremism, redneckism, racism, Islamophobia, transphobia, homophobia. You name the phobias, these countries are supposed to be responsible. They only named one country, ours, Australia. Then they went further. They mentioned only one party, all over the world, only one party, one nation. I'm extremely proud of having achieved that. The globalists in the World Economic Forum used to preen themselves, turning up at Davos every year, and then every summer, their summer in the Northern Territory, in the Northern Hemisphere, they'd go to China and preen themselves. Then they started getting a bit cocky. We started smashing them. And now Davos is ridiculed. People laugh at Davos. Get smart again. Senator, are you aware of the International Bird Flu Summit coming up in early October? Yes, I am. I haven't done the details on that. And it is scary stuff. But I think people are waking up. So hopefully we'll be able to make sure people stand up and speak, stand up and call out the government if they try to do something like that in this country. Genesis, thank you, mate. Massive support for One Nation, Australia's only chance of a credible future. We are the only alternative to the Uni Party. You know, people thought it was Labor and Liberal as alternatives. They're not. They're the same bloody thing. And the only alternative is the One Nation. Rosalind says, keep hammering them, Malcolm. We have to get out of the UN, World Economic Forum, etc. Absolutely right. And these bastards are globalists. They're not just the World Economic Forum, not just the UN. There's also the Bank for International Settlements. The Federal Reserve Bank in America is a tool for the globalists. The World Bank, the International Monetary Fund. They're all part of the game. Oh, and why has it happened? That's the other question I think gets smart-ass. Why has it happened? Because the people in this country have fallen asleep. And that's probably, including me, I didn't get involved until I saw this climate fraud going on in 2008. Then I started getting involved, and that's what took me into politics, because I was holding governments and ministers and parliaments accountable. But the people have largely fallen asleep. And you can see that we are relentlessly bombarded by the media leading up to an election. Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Labor, Liberal, Labor. So people are confused. They're conned into thinking one party is different from the other when they're not. One party's policies are different when they're not. And they walk in and say, well, mum voted Liberal, Dad voted Labor, so I vote Liberal, Labor, whatever. Alana, Malcolm Roberts, are my children going to be conscripted into the forever war, as several MPs and media are already talking about? Just asking for my kids. Well, as a mother, I'm sure you're asking for you, actually, but that is a really sensible question. First of all, I love the fact that you've raised the forever war. It's the globalists pushing around others, hiding behind America, hiding behind various of America's allies. So that is the first thing, for acknowledge it. Thank you so much. And the second thing is, it all depends upon how many people start speaking the way you're speaking, holding MPs accountable. You know, when the Soviet Union went into Ukraine 2 years ago, it was at February 2022, 2.5 years ago nearly, there was a memo put on each senator's desk. And Maurice Payne came in to read that memo as a statement, vilifying Putin, vilifying Russia, vilifying, you know, the people who marched into Ukraine, and condemning them and saying, we will hound them out, we will chase them down. And I was sitting in the Senate at the time, and I just made some notes and on this sheet of paper, and I waited and I just listened. Senators from the Greens Party, senators from the Labor Party, senators from the Liberal Party, senators from the National Party, filing in just bit by bit, making a speech. Yes, we've got to nail Putin. Yes, we've got to nail Russia. Yes, we've got to support them. And I let several of them speak, and then I stood up and said, how about we just pause and ask a few questions? Find out the cause of these conflict. Find out what drove it. Just ask some questions instead of blindly following one side and vilifying the other. So it's a very complex situation, but we need to honour our Defence Forces. It's interesting, we're finishing with the talk about the Defence Force, and that's the way we started. We need to honour our boys and girls, our young men and women, by actually thinking responsibly about what we're doing and asking questions before we blindly follow into yet another damn war. So the answer to your question, Alana, is it depends how many people wake up, how many people you can help us wake up, how many people can ask the question, and how many people can stand up. How can we support our farmers? Again, hold the members of Parliament accountable, buy farm produce, see if you can get it direct from the farmers, give them a better price. Farmers markets, wonderful if you can. But become aware. The biggest way is to become aware. Become aware of the fact that farmers' property rights were stolen by the Howard Liberal National Party government in collusion with the National Party government under Borbidge as Premier in Queensland from 1996 to 2007. It was done to comply with the United Nations Kyoto Protocol, so that John Howard could comply, his government could comply with the UN Kyoto Protocol. That's in writing from Peter Beattie, who followed in 1998, followed Borbidge, and in a video statement from Bob Carr. That's truth. And once that dam was cracked, the Labor Party in Queensland stole farmers' property rights willy-nilly. How much chemicals they can use, how they farm, what they do with their farm. And now we see the rights being stolen in suburban areas. People aren't aware, but rights are being stolen. Land taken of people who want to develop their land if they've been fortunate enough to get some land in the past, hang on to it for many years. The Brisbane City Council is just stealing from them, just taking their land. Mossman City Council has a dictate on how much concrete and how much grass you can have in your garden. That's interfering with your property rights. And so we see in transgressions of this that started with John Howard's government stealing property rights with no compensation. He actually went against the Constitution. His government went against the Constitution. That's why they went through the states to do it, because the states don't have to pay compensation. So Instagram is just disconnected because we've gone for an hour. So I will call it quits. But we will pursue the COVID until we get a Royal Commission, until we get justice. Maybe the bill I co-sponsored with Alex Antic, Jared Rennick, Matt Canavan, Ralph Babert, and Pauline Hanson will be moved, and we can get a judicial commission of inquiry. But anyway, it's a beautiful country we have here, wonderful people. We've just got to get it firing again by getting out of the clutches of the globalists, working through the Uni Party, Liberal Labor. So have a great weekend, and hopefully we'll be talking next week.